This episode contains sensitive subjects which may be distressing to some. Listeners be advised.
When I grabbed the knife, he cinched it to my neck even tighter. And when he threw me behind the truck, I realized my fingers were bleeding.
Miss Crosby recalls the time she was attacked in an alleyway and held at knife point as her attacker attempted to rape her. Today, we hear her story of sexual assault. This is Jess Faulkner, and you're listening to my podcast, Just Jess. Today's episode is called Survival, Salsa, and Solidarity.
I don't remember exactly the age, but I'm pretty sure it was under 5.
That's what Miss Crosby said when I asked her about the first time she was ever sexually assaulted. On average, there are 463,634 victims who are 12 and older of rape and sexual assault each year in the United States. So I appreciate you telling me this information. I know that it's not always easy to recount information like this, but is there a specific story you're wanting to tell?
Yes, so I was in my hometown. I was 20 years old. I was getting ready to go to work, and I put my uniform in a bag, and I set out to go walk up the main road. It was like a 3-car lane at 6:45 in the morning. I had to get there at 7, and I turned around, and I noticed that there was a man walking further away from me. And not too long after that, I turned around again. He was getting closer quickly. Well, I was almost at work, and next time I knew it, someone grabbed me, stuck a knife to my throat, and my natural reaction was I grabbed the knife to pull it away from my throat, and he cinched it closer to my throat and pushed me off the sidewalk behind a big truck where no one seen. I got scared. I was really afraid, and I felt really weak. He told me to take off my clothes while he held the knife to my stomach. So I did. I don't remember crying. I don't remember begging for my life. I just remember being frozen and doing as he told me. He made me lay on my back, and he proceeded to pull his pants down. And I don't remember seeing anything, but I don't know if I was closing my eyes. I don't remember if I had my head turned, but I felt him on top of me, and I remember my back was rubbing against the cement, and he could not penetrate. I think he could not penetrate. He was trying and trying and trying, and it made him mad. I kept my mouth shut, and he got up, pulled his pants on, told me to get my clothes on, and he looked in my bag, and he saw my cigarettes, and he pulled out my cigarettes, and he told me, "If you say anything, I'm going to kill you." When he was done with me, I noticed I had an abrasion on my back. My fingers were bleeding. And when I went to the police, I had a mark on my neck. Put my clothes on, took my bag, walked up, and not a few seconds later, I broke down. I was crying in shock, went in and told my manager. I was sent home. I don't remember how I got home. And I went to the hospital. They did a rape test on me. And back then they didn't have the DNA. They just did this rape test on me, and I went to go tell my mom, and my mom got mad and said that I'm making it up. You got pregnant. You're just making it up and blaming it on a rape. I was so mortified. I was so mortified that the first opportunity I got on someone's back of their motorcycle and went to California and stayed with some so-called friends. And then years later, my mom and I started talking, and I finally brought it up to her, and I told her that I never lied to her. It really happened to me. And she apologized, and it was like a relief, but I understood that I don't know if she was not wanting to believe me.
How do you feel like that experience changed you?
Well, you asked me if I was sexually assaulted many times, and I have been. But this one, when I was 20, made me hyper vigilant. I'm constantly looking around and making sure that I'm safe. When I go out my door, I'm safe. No one touches me. I don't like being touched. For the longest time, for the first year and a half, I swore I saw this man's face everywhere I went, even in a different state. I'm just always aware of my surroundings.
Were you ever able to tell a trusted adult?
Yes, but eventually, as I got older, I elaborated and told exactly what happened when I got comfortable with someone I trusted.
Is there anything that you want to tell everybody listening?
Well, I know that there's a lot of sexual assaults. I know that some people will never tell. Some people will tell. And it's really hard for others to accept it.
I asked Miss Crosby how she would like to be referred to as, and she said at first a victim, but in the end, a survivor. The advice that Miss Crosby had for listeners:
I want you to be totally aware of your surroundings.
You may be wondering, what's the best way for you to support a survivor? Supporting someone who has experienced rape or another form of sexual violence or abuse can feel really hard, but by being there and listening to them, you're already helping. Here are some other things in mind. Listen. What they are saying might be very difficult or upsetting for you to hear, but it's important to show them that you're really listening. Please don't interrupt. Do believe them. People rarely lie about child sexual abuse, rape, or other forms of sexual violence. Remember that it's not their fault. 100% of the blame, shame, and responsibility for sexual violence and abuse lies with the perpetrator or perpetrators. Recognize how tough it must be for them to tell you. It can be very hard for victims and survivors to talk about what happened to them. For lots of people, having to go back over an experience of sexual violence or abuse is upsetting and painful, which is one of the reasons why it takes some people a long time to tell everyone. Some victims and survivors also feel ashamed or guilty, or worry that they'll be judged, blamed, or not believed. Do let them stay in control. Sexual violence or abuse of any kind can make a person feel powerless or like they've lost control. So for many victims and survivors, it's important to feel in charge of their own lives again. If you hear that someone you care about has been hurt, it can be tempting to try to take charge and fix it, but it's important to not take over or make decisions for other people unless they ask you to. Instead, support them to work through their feelings, explore their options, and make their own decisions. You do need to respect their decisions. There's no right or wrong way to feel after sexual violence or abuse, and only a victim or survivor can really know what's best for them. Try to be patient and respect their boundaries. Many victims and survivors find it difficult to trust people because of their experiences, especially if they've been let down or not believed by others they've told in the past. Remember, there's no timeline for getting over sexual violence or abuse. This particular story of abuse happened to Miss Crosby over 30 years ago. But as she recounts the story, you can see that the pain and the experience is still very close to her. And unfortunately, it's not just adults who have to deal with sexual assault. The prevalence of child sexual abuse is difficult to determine because it's not reported. But experts agree that the incident is far greater than what is reported to authorities. Here are some statistics from the National Center for Victims of Crime. 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is the victim of child sexual abuse. During a 1-year period in the U.S., 16% of youth ages 14 to 17 had been sexually victimized. Over a course of their lifetime, 28% of the U.S. youth ages 14 to 17 had been sexually victimized. Children are most vulnerable to child sexual assault between the ages of 7 and 13. Self-report studies show that 20% of adult females and 5 to 10% of adult males recall a childhood sexual assault or sexual abuse incident. Now, I'd like to take some time to share my story of sexual abuse as a child. The first time I was sexually abused, I was 4 years old. It happened inside of my own home. I remember it to this very day, very clear details of what happened, and I believe it to be my first memory. But that's not the story I want to tell today. Today I want to talk about the time I was 7 years old. It was after school, and my older brother and I were spending time in one of our tree forts that we had built by the school. We did this often as we were latchkey kids, and getting home didn't seem like such a big rush. We would often play in our tree huts and our tree houses after school for a while before we would head home. This day was the same as every other day. We decided to go play in our tree hut after school. But this time, one of our neighbor kids came with us. This was a neighbor who lived right across the alley from us, so we were pretty familiar with him. He was in 5th grade while I was in 2nd grade. I remember standing by the tree and feeling him come up behind me and put his hands on me and ask me if I wanted a boyfriend. I remember wondering where my brother was at and knowing that the way I was being touched was a way that I shouldn't be touched. I remember my dad, my mom, and my oldest brother coming to pick us up in the truck. I remember very clearly I told my dad what happened while we were in the truck, and he didn't say much about it. And it broke my heart because I remember wanting to feel protected as a child. This was a person who lived very close to us. And I was scared that he was going to put his hands on me again. I was afraid. So it really hurt when I wasn't listened to as a child at 7 years old. This wasn't the first time I was sexually assaulted, and it certainly was not the last time. A study conducted in 1986 found that 63% of women who had suffered sexual abuse by a family member also reported a rape or attempted rape after the age of 14. Recent studies in 2000, 2002, and 2005 have all concluded similar results. Children who had an experience of rape or attempted rape in their adolescent years were 13.7 times more likely to experience rape or attempted rape in their first year of college. A child who is the victim of prolonged sexual abuse usually develops low self-esteem, a feeling of worthlessness, and an abnormal or distorted view of sex. The child may become withdrawn and mistrustful of adults and can become suicidal. This information means that a person is more likely to be sexually assaulted later in life once they've been sexually assaulted as a child. For me personally, I have experienced this. My sexual assault started at 4 years old, and the last time I was sexually assaulted was 25. I've had numerous sexual assaults, rapes, and have faced sexual abuse during this time. Miss Crosby reports a similar story, stating that the abuse she suffered at 20 was not the first time, nor was it the last time that she would suffer. The truth of the matter is that there are a lot of survivors of sexual assault out there. A lot of men and a lot of women who go about their lives every day living with a fear and a hurt that's indescribable. It could be your friend, your teacher, your parent, your sibling, or even your significant other. I think there are a lot more of us out there than what people realize. Of course, there are ways to move forward. There are ways to heal and to be healthy after a sexual assault. Helpguide.org provides a few steps on how you can heal after dealing with a sexual assault or rape. Step 1. Open up about what happened to you. It can be very difficult to admit that you were raped or sexually assaulted. There's a stigma attached. It can make you feel dirty and weak, and you could be afraid to how others will react. Reach out to someone you trust. Challenge your sense of helplessness and isolation. Maybe consider joining a support group. Step 2. Cope with feelings of guilt or shame. Even if you intellectually understand that you're not to blame for the rape or sexual attack, you may still struggle with a sense of guilt or shame. Feelings of guilt and shame often stem from misconceptions such as, you didn't stop the assault from happening, or you trusted someone you shouldn't have, or maybe you were drunk and not cautious enough. Step 3, prepare for flashbacks and upsetting memories. When you go through something stressful, your body temporarily goes into fight or flight mode. When the threat has passed, your body calms down. But traumatic experiences such as rape can cause your nervous system to become stuck in a state of high alert. You're hypersensitive to the smallest of stimuli. This is the case for many rape survivors. To reduce the stress of flashbacks and upsetting memories, try to anticipate and prepare for triggers. Pay attention to your body's danger signals, and take immediate steps to self-soothe. Soothe panic with this simple breathing exercise. Sit or stand comfortably with your back straight. Put one hand on your chest and the other on your stomach. Take a slow breath in through your nose, counting to 4. The hand on your stomach should rise. The hand on your chest should move very little. Hold your breath for a count of 7. Exhale through your mouth to a count of 8, pushing out as much air as you can while contracting your abdominal muscles. The hand on your stomach should move in as you exhale, but your other hand should move very little. Inhale again, repeating the cycle until you feel relaxed and centered. Some tips for dealing with flashbacks include accepting and reassuring yourself that this is a flashback and not reality, and grounding yourself in the present. Step 4, reconnect to your body and feelings. Since your nervous system is a hypersensitive state following a rape or assault, you may start trying to numb yourself or avoid any associations with the trauma. Signs you've been avoiding and numbing in unhelpful ways include feeling physically shut down, feeling separate from your body or surroundings, having trouble concentrating and remembering things, using stimulants, risky activities, or physical pain to feel alive and counteract the empty feeling inside of you, compulsively using drugs or alcohol, escaping through fantasies, daydreams, or excessive TV, video games, etc., feeling detached from the world, the people in your life, and your activities you used to enjoy. To recover after rape, you need to reconnect to your body and feelings. Step 5. It's common to feel isolated and disconnected from others following a sexual assault. Having a fun and laughing with people who you care about can be equally healing. Try to participate in social activities, reconnect with old friends, and make new friends. Step 6. Nurturing yourself. Healing from sexual trauma is a gradual, ongoing process. It doesn't happen overnight, nor do the memories of the trauma ever disappear completely. This can make life seem difficult at times, but there are many steps you can take to cope with the residual symptoms and reduce your anxiety and fear. Take time to rest and restore your body's balance. Be smart about media consumption. Take care of yourself physically and avoid alcohol and drugs. Taking care of yourself after a rape or a sexual assault can be hard, but you can do it. Remember that there are people who love you, people who want you to be around, and people who are willing to help you heal. There is help out there. You can always call the National Sexual Assault Hotline at 1-800-656-4673 or visit their website at rainn.org, rain.org. If you or someone you know is in danger of sexual abuse or is being sexually assaulted or sexually abused, please call 911. I've been thinking about how to continue on from a segment such as sexual assault and what segment to also include in this show. I thought about including segments that were equally as serious. Instead of including my usual recipe or poem, part of me wants to make this segment a standalone episode because of the seriousness of it. But then thinking about it, I realized that this should be normal conversation. We should normalize talking about sexual trauma and sexual abuse because it happens to so many of us. And if we were just to tell our stories more, I feel like we would feel less alone in our trauma. So I'm going to continue this podcast by giving you a recipe for some of the salsa that I like to make at home. Here's what you're going to need. You're going to need 8 Roma tomatoes that are halved lengthwise, 6 unpeeled garlic cloves, 1 chipotle chili in adobo sauce, 1 large white onion cut in fourths, 1 large jalapeno that's been cored and halved, 1 large handful of fresh cilantro, 1 tablespoon of freshly squeezed lime juice, 1 teaspoon of fine sea salt, and a half teaspoon of ground cumin. Preheat your oven to high broil. You're going to arrange your tomatoes, your garlic cloves, your onion, and jalapeno in an even layer on a baking sheet and broil for about 10 minutes, or until the tomatoes and jalapenos have blistered and are pretty blackened. You're going to remove the pan from the oven and peel and discard the skin from the garlic cloves once they've been cooled. Transfer the tomatoes, onion, garlic, and jalapeno to a bowl or a food processor. Now, you can either use the food processor to blend up your salsa, or you can put it in a bowl and use a hand blender or an emulsion blender. That would work as well. So after you've blended up your salsa, and now you can add the rest of your ingredients and puree the salsa until it's smooth or the consistency that you desire. Let your salsa chill until it's cooled, and then enjoy. Now, I'd like to take a second to recognize some of you who are listening right now. Over 1/4 of my audience identifies as non-binary, which is what I am as well, how I identify as well. I identify as non-binary. So I thought I would take some time to explain what non-binary means and how you can be respectful and supportive according to the National Center for Transgender Equality. Most people, including most transgender people, are either male or female, but some people don't neatly fit into the categories of man or woman or male or female. For example, some people have a gender that blends elements of being a man or a woman, or a gender that is different than either male or female. Some people don't identify with any gender. Some people's gender changes over time. People whose gender is not male or female use many different terms to describe themselves, with non-binary being one of the most common. Other terms include genderqueer, agender, bigender, gender fluid, and more. None of these terms mean exactly the same thing, but all speak to an experience of gender that is not simply male or female. If you're not sure what a word means, you can usually just ask politely. So why non-binary? Some societies, like ours, tend to recognize just 2 genders, male and female. The idea that there are only 2 genders is sometimes called gender binary, because binary means having 2 parts, male and female. Therefore, non-binary is one term people use to describe genders that don't fall into one of the 2 categories, male or female. Here's some basic facts about non-binary people. Non-binary people are nothing new. Non-binary people aren't confused about their gender identity or following a new fad. Non-binary identities have been recognized for millennia by cultures and societies around the world. Some people, but not all, binary people undergo medical procedures to make their bodies more congruent with their gender identity. Most transgender people are not non-binary. While some transgender people are non-binary, most transgender people have a gender identity that is either male or female and should be treated like any other man or woman. Being non-binary is not the same thing as being intersex. Intersex people have the anatomy or genes that don't fit typical definitions of male and female. Most intersex people identify as either men or women, though some may be non-binary. Non-binary people are usually not intersex. They're usually born with bodies that may fit typical definitions of male and female, but their innate gender identity is something other than male or female. Easy ways for you to be respectful and supportive of non-binary people include not having to understand what it means for someone to be non-binary to respect them. I'm not asking for it to make sense to you. I'm just asking for you to respect me. Use the name a person asks you to use. It's just Jess. Just Jess. Try not to make any assumption about people's gender. If you're not sure what pronouns someone uses, ask. Advocate for non-binary friendly policies. And understand that for many non-binary people, navigating gendered spaces like bathrooms can be challenging. Talk to non-binary people to learn more about who we are. There's no one way to be non-binary. The best way to understand what it's like to be non-binary is to talk with a non-binary person and listen to what they have to say. So if you know a non-binary person, please show respect and support, as we are just people too, trying to navigate the same waters of life that you are. Just talk to us. We're just regular people, but we're pretty cool. For me personally, I realized I was non-binary in 2020. I had always been kind of gender fluid. Looking back, I had always been kind of gender fluid throughout my life, presenting both as male and female and feeling both more masculine and then sometimes more feminine. And I recognize that now from as young as when I was 19. I didn't know there was a term for what I was feeling until 2020, when I had a friend who came out as non-binary and talked a bit about it on Facebook. So I'm pretty thankful that somebody spoke up and said something about what non-binary means to them and kind of gave a general definition of non-binary, as I did for you just earlier, to help me really understand who I am. And it kind of clicked as soon as I read about it, and as soon as they talked about it, it clicked that I'm non-binary too. I just feel so masculine sometimes. Or maybe I say I feel masculine, but maybe I just feel like what people associate with masculinity is just how I am. That's just how I am. I have those traits that are associated with masculinity. That, and I really, really want to grow a beard. True story. I would grow a beard. I'm so jealous of Jonathan Van Ness, who just has the most beautiful beard ever and the most gorgeous hair. And he's also non-binary. He's gender non-conforming, I should say, though he does prefer he, him pronouns. My pronouns personally are she, he, they. I will take anything you want to throw my way. I think it really depends on how I'm identifying that day. And I've come to realize that my bipolar cycles do kind of play a part in how I'm feeling about myself, as well as my cycles, my menstrual cycles. They kind of have a play part in how I'm feeling about myself. You know, I think it's only chemical in your body for you to maybe feel more feminine or more some type of way, I'm gonna say, when you're ovulating. I know I always do. I always feel a lot more feminine, just woman energy, woman power when I'm ovulating. So I'm usually identifying as a woman while I'm ovulating. Very, very infrequently do I identify as masculine while I'm ovulating. And there you go. We just talked about ovulation. Cool. You know, when I was a kid, they always called me a tomboy, and I hated that. I hated being called a tomboy because I also had inside of me a very, feminine little girl. And it seemed like it was hard for parents to understand how to strike a balance between wanting to be treated like a boy and play like a boy, but also have times where you're treated like a lady. When I was growing up, it was just about being ladylike. That's what I heard all the time. I just heard about how I needed to be ladylike and what was expected of me as a lady. I got in trouble, for so one time it was Valentine's Day and I was in second grade and my grandma Huggins came to bring us our Valentines for that year. And she came to the house, and of course, my parents were at work, and it was just this kid's home. And I was across the street in the creek looking for crawdads, because that's what you do when you're growing up in Oklahoma, in February. You go crawdad hunting. She came across me in the creek and just chewed me out. Told me that this was no place for a lady to be. This really made me feel pretty bad about being in the creek as a little girl. Told me I need to be inside and was upset that my dress was dirty. My dad also told me a lot growing up. He would also tell me that I needed to act like a lady. Then he would turn around and wrestle with my brothers, which seemed like a lot of fun to me, because they would physically play, and I would want my dad to physically play with me too, and he just refused to do it because it wasn't ladylike. And I think just in general, the attitude toward boys in my house felt different. It felt, I remember, starting my period and having my pads out on the counter in a bathroom that I shared with my brothers. My dad put them away and was like, they shouldn't have to see that. You don't need to keep that out on the counter. But there was always a stack of Playboys in my dad's bathroom that we used occasionally when, our bathroom was full, just sitting on the back of the toilet, just hanging out there. And even as a kid, I didn't really understand how that worked. How open nudity was better to look at and to be exposed to than unused pads in a package on the counter. I'm a 90s kid. Our parents come from a different time. They come from a different time. I think what matters now is that my dad is very accepting of who I am. He doesn't claim to understand it, but he accepts it. And I think that's really cool of him. And, I've expressed to him, hey, I wish things could have gone like this when I was a kid. And I wish, you would have played with me when I was a kid. And, we've had those talks. So it's also cool that he's just open to hearing what I have to say in general. So I think that shows change and progress. Now, not everybody has been so supportive of my non-binary status. I talked to my grandmother for the first time in about 13 years in February last year. She called me to tell me she was proud of me and she wanted to talk to me. And I told her in part of the conversation I'm queer and non-binary, and she would not accept it. She abruptly hung up the phone. I don't really hold it against her because I feel like it's a generational thing. She didn't even understand what I meant when I said I'm queer. She said, "Don't call yourself that." Then I proceeded to explain what I meant when I say I'm queer, and she was confused because I'm in a heterosexual marriage, which I can also understand. I don't really hold it against my grandma for not understanding my pronouns or my sexual preferences. I just wish that it didn't have to divide us so harshly. In the end, I'm glad I told her I was non-binary because I knew that she was going to be a hard sell. And I'm glad that I finally kind of stood up and claimed who I am to my grandma, who always told me who to be. I'm very proud to be non-binary. I love being gender fluid. I feel so comfortable in it. I feel so comfortable with myself. I feel like I finally have an understanding of who I am, and it's so wonderful for me. And I hope that all of you non-binary people who are listening feel the same way too. I hope you find comfort in the fact that you don't conform to standards of what makes a man and what makes a woman. I think that's really cool. Way to go. Way to be. And thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your support. And please know that if you need support, I'm here for you. If you ever need to get a hold of me, or you need somebody to talk to, or you need resources and you just don't know where to turn, you just don't have a place to turn, please reach out to me via email or leave me a message on Spotify or message me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. I mean, you could Google my business and find my phone number if you really needed to. Just know that you're not alone, okay? There are lots of us out here just trying to live our best lives, doing the best that we can, and it's all of us. We're not alone. This is Solidarity by Fred L. Joyner. Every night a woman, at least as old as my mother, with a walk labored like my grandmother's last steps, enters my office to clean. Tonight is our last night in the building. She and I talk like old friends parting ways for the last time or new friends leaving each other for the first. She utters a few words to me in her smiling Spanish and English. My tongue searches for the right response in my troubled Spanish. We both laugh, sifting through the things our employer has instructed me to discard. We both laugh knowing. She finds a small black pouch big enough to hold a month's pay in her bosom. She shows me the pouch, mimes how she will hide it from the night's hungry hands. She puts her hand on her chest, says, El Salvador. I tell her I am from D.C. Anacostia, I say. She nods. She knows. We both have learned to live well off what others abandon. Thank you to everyone listening. I appreciate all your support. You can find more podcast information and my blog at www.leftoverslimited.com. And in case somebody hasn't told you today, you're so wonderful. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for trying to be the best version of yourself that you can be, because that's the best thing that you can do. And you're doing it for you, and you're doing it for others, and you're doing a great job. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Take care of each other. I love you.